Hi, my name is Jay Gordon, and I'll be presenting He Blew the Whistle and Health Giants Quake for my ethics seminar presentation. Now, this case details a nearly 6-year legal battle of a Queen Tom or false claims case filed under seal in federal court in Butte, Montana, where Mr. Alderson was asked by Clyde Eder, who's the quorum administrator hired by the North Valley Hospital Group, to oversee their finances. And he was specifically asked to keep 2 sets of cost reports. One was aggressive and submitted to the government. Second was conservative for internal use in case the aggressive reimbursements were audited, which there was a 2-year time frame. And in that reserve, after 2 years was not used, they would book it as income. He refused and was shortly fired. Mr. Anderson ended up filing a qui tam case, which allowed an individual to file a fraud suit on behalf of the government after speaking to Mr. Jessup, who was the previous North Valley administrator. After they discussed, he's like, "This sounds like fraudulent activity to me," end quote. And ultimately, this case took 6 years to become unsealed and ultimately led to the prosecution and indictment of 3 Columbia executives. And the IMA Statement of Ethical Professional Practice, or otherwise known as SEPP, details 4 standards: competence, confidentiality, integrity, and credibility, which after reading this case, I am confident in saying that Mr. Alderson upheld these 4 standards in an overarching framework of honesty, fairness, objectivity, and responsibility. I'm going to talk about competence first. Mr. Alderson opened his own accounting firm, whose clients included the local hospital in North Valley. So he did have competence, he had professional expertise. The specific standard states to maintain an appropriate level of professional leadership and expertise by enhancing skills and knowledge, which Mr. Alderson fully represented. He knew US GAAP, he knew relevant laws and the technical standards, which was shown in this case and his court battle with the defendants. Second, keep information confidential except when disclosure is authorized or legally required, and to refrain from using confidential information for unethical or illegal advantage. He did this under the standard of confidentiality. He knew that the US government was a victim of systemic and organized fraudulent cost reporting and sought 6 years to hold them accountable. Third is integrity. To abstain from engaging in or supporting any activity that might discredit the profession, which Mr. Alderson did. He stood for ethical practice when he said no and took 6 years to diligently pursue those responsible. And it wasn't just one person, it was a systemic scheme throughout the whole United States, and it really shook the hospital industry and profession. He really did act with moral courage when he filed suit and continued this prosecution for nearly 6 years under the leadership and direction of his attorney, Stephen Manger, as well. The fourth and final is credibility. Mr. Alderson did this through this case by analyzing years of cost reports and financial reimbursement, piecing together that narrative, and only presenting this to relevant parties such as the US government, investigators, and lawyers of the courts. Now, with credibility, the main standard here that's important to point out is that it's to communicate information fairly and objectively, which is what he did. And he did it in a sustained manner through the 6 years. And in conclusion, 3 Columbia executives in Florida were indicted for cost reporting fraud. And 6 years later, again, the government did join the case. It was unsealed. And then it was finally reported on because it wasn't being talked about. But thanks to one person, he uncovered the fraudulent filings that were being done, brought this to the US government's doorstep, and through diligence, courage, and ethical and moral values, he upheld this, and so did his family. And what's interesting about this case is that they didn't do it for money or glory or fame or to be the hero. Mr. Alderson's quoted with his family as being quiet and not speculating on how much money they could share if a settlement was reached. But it was reported in the case that it was nearly 25% of any recovery made to the US government. So overall, after reviewing the SEPP in relation to Mr. Alderson's behavior, I believe that he did uphold the standards of the IMA and the Statement of Ethical Professional Practice. Thank you.